Through the precision-ground glass of his Springfield M1903 scope, Corporal James "Jimmy" Kelleher stared at death itself, a German observation bunker 480 yards distant across the war-torn valley. For 21 days, that concrete fortress had been untouchable. 3 Allied snipers lay buried because they'd tried to silence it. 17 infantrymen had charged it in desperation, only to be cut down. The German spotter inside continued his deadly work, calling down artillery strikes that claimed 8 American lives daily. In less than 5 minutes, Keller would fire a single bullet through an opening narrower than a deck of cards, hitting a target that every military manual declared impossible to engage. Within 42 days, his revolutionary method would ripple through every Allied sniper unit in Italy, destroying 127 fortified positions and preserving an estimated 340 lives from certain death. The Pool Hall Prodigy. James Kelleher's childhood unfolded in a cramped 3-room apartment in Charlestown, Massachusetts, where the perpetual smell of boiled cabbage mixed with machine oil from the nearby dockyards. His father earned poverty wages loading ammunition at the Charlestown Navy Yard, laboring 16-hour shifts during the Depression's darkest years. While neighborhood children played stickball in the streets, 12-year-old Jimmy haunted Murphy's Pool Hall on Main Street. He wasn't seeking trouble. He'd discovered a supernatural gift. His mind calculated deflection angles off cushions with savant-like precision, sinking impossible combination shots that defied straight-line physics. Frank Murphy, the establishment's grizzled owner, recognized something extraordinary in the kid. "You think in ricochets," Frank observed one afternoon, watching Jimmy execute a 4-rail bank shot. "Most people see the ball in the pocket. You see every surface the ball could kiss between here and there." Academic education ended at 16, when Jimmy's father's spine finally surrendered to decades of brutal labor. The boy dropped out to take his old man's shift, learning to read engineering blueprints for crane operations, calculating load-bearing angles for ship repairs with the same instinctive precision he'd once applied to pool balls. December 8, 1941. Pearl Harbor's smoke had barely cleared when Jimmy walked into the recruitment office. The recruiter glanced at crane operator on his application and rubber-stamped him for Fort Benning infantry training. The range that changed everything. The rifle range revealed Jimmy's true calling. He qualified as expert marksman with scores so exceptional that instructors suspected fraud. But his accuracy wasn't what captured their attention, it was his unorthodox methodology. While other recruits fired from textbook positions, prone, kneeling, standing, Keller hunted for unconventional angles. He'd shoot around barriers, beneath obstacles, even experiment with reflective surfaces. His positioning seemed choreographed by some invisible geometry teacher. "This kid shoots like he's playing 3-dimensional chess instead of war," one sergeant scrawled in his evaluation file. They designated him a sniper. North Africa came first, then Sicily, then the brutal Italian mainland campaign with the 36th Infantry Division. By March 1944, Keller had logged 19 confirmed kills. Solid work, nothing extraordinary. He followed doctrine religiously: establish elevated position, determine range, compensate for wind, squeeze trigger. Germans died. The war ground forward. Then the Rapido River Valley changed everything. The Impregnable Fortress. The Gustav Line fortifications represented 18 months of German engineering brilliance. Every bunker, every pillbox, every observation post had been architected by men who understood that concrete geometry defeated raw firepower. Allied artillery pounded these positions for weeks. High explosive rounds created spectacular craters. The Germans sheltered underground during bombardments, then emerged to resume their killing once the shelling ceased. Monte Cassino dominated the valley like a stone god. German observers tracked every American movement, summoning artillery with surgical precision. One particular position, designated Strong Point 7 in intelligence reports, sat embedded in the mountainside 480 yards from American lines. The bunker's German spotter commanded a perfect view of the valley floor. Whenever Allied forces attempted advancement, artillery shells arrived within 90 seconds. 8 men, every single day, like clockwork. Standard sniper doctrine commanded, suppress the observer. But Strong Point 7 had been designed by someone who truly understood ballistics. The firing slit faced perpendicular to probable sniper positions. 3-foot-thick reinforced concrete walls. Even with a perfect angle, the slit measured only 18 inches wide by 8 inches tall. The German observer stayed deep inside, invisible to any direct line of fire. 3 men, 3 failures, 3 graves. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, March 1, 1944, 6:15 a.m. Chen positioned himself 520 yards northeast, calculating a shot through the firing slit during that 30-second window when morning light might silhouette his target. He fired. The round sparked off concrete 6 inches left. German snipers had been watching for muzzle flash. Return fire came 8 seconds later.
Chen died with a bullet through his throat. 23 years old, from Sacramento. Engaged to a nurse named Dorothy, who received the telegram 9 days later. Sergeant William Morrison, March 4, 1944, 2:30 p.m. Morrison reasoned that sustained suppressive fire might force the German away from his position long enough for an assault team to advance. He fired 17 rounds in 40 seconds, all aimed at the firing slit. 3 rounds actually entered the bunker. None found the observer. The German called down a mortar barrage. Morrison and 2 squad members died in the first salvo. Morrison was 31, from Tulsa. Left behind a 6-year-old daughter named Sarah, who kept his final letter for 60 years. Private First Class Eddie Donovan, March 8, 1944, morning. 20 years old, Brooklyn, former Golden Gloves boxer. Donovan didn't attempt to shoot through the slit. He tried advancing under smoke cover to grenade range. German machine gun fire cut through the smoke at knee height. Donovan bled out in a crater 15 yards from the bunker. His body wasn't recovered for 4 days. Casualty count: 3 snipers dead, 14 infantry killed in assault attempts. The German observer remained operational. Every briefing included identical assessment. Strong Point 7 continues fire direction capability. No solution identified. 6 days of obsession. Keller had shared a foxhole with Morrison the night before he died. They'd traded stories about home. Morrison showed photographs, his daughter on a tire swing, his wife in a Sunday dress. After this, I'm teaching Sarah to fish, taking her to Lake Texoma, spending the whole summer doing absolutely nothing. The next morning, Morrison was buried in a mass grave with 17 other men. Keller studied the bunker for 6 days straight. He sketched diagrams on cigarette packages, calculated angles with a carpenter's protractor, borrowed from an engineer unit. The problem wasn't the bunker's strength. The problem was everyone thought in straight lines: direct fire, direct assault, direct suppression. German engineers had designed for direct threats, but Keller had grown up at a pool hall. The impossible proposal. March 12th, morning. Briefing. Keller approached Captain Raymond Hayes. "Sir, I need permission to attempt Strong Point 7. Hayes looked up from his coffee. "Keller, 3 snipers have tried. All dead. I'm proposing at an indirect fire, sir." "Indirect fire is artillery's job, Corporal." "Not indirect artillery, sir. Indirect rifle fire, through the beam gap." Hayes stared. The what? Keller spread his sketches on the table. The bunker has a concrete roof supported by I-beams. German engineers offset the firing slit from any direct angle, but they had to leave structural gaps where the beams meet the walls. There's a 3-inch gap 18 inches above the firing slit. If I position at bearing 247, elevation advantage of 32 feet, I can fire through that gap. The round deflects off the I-beam's inner angle, redirects downward through the firing slit at approximately 43 degrees if I hit the precise point where beam meet wall. Hayes studied the diagram in silence. You want back a rifle round off a steel beam, like a pool shot. Yes, sir. That's insane. It's geometry, sir. That's court-martial territory if you waste ammunition on trick shots while men are dying. Keller met his eyes steadily. Men are dying because we keep trying the same straight-line doctrine. Morrison died because we don't think in angles. Chen died because we're predictable. Donovan died because we're out of ideas. Hayes was quiet for 30 seconds. Finally, you get one shot, Corporal. One. If you miss, you're back on standard patrol. If you hit, we'll talk. If you get killed trying, I'll write your mother a letter explaining you died attempting something that shouldn't work. Understood, sir. Hayes turned back to his maps. Dismissed. The mathematics of murder. That night, Keller calculated. The beam gap, 3 inches wide. At 480 yards, that created a target window smaller than a quarter. The deflection angle off the I-beam's inner surface would redirect the round approximately 43 degrees downward if he hit the precise point where beam made wall. The German observer would be standing roughly 6 feet back from the firing slit, standard doctrine for protected observation. A round entering at 43 degrees downward would strike him center mass if everything worked perfectly. If. The valley wind shifted every 8 minutes. Temperature differential between day and night was 30 degrees, affecting air density. The M1903 Springfield was accurate to 800 yards under ideal conditions. But this wasn't ideal. This was attempting to thread a needle from 5 football fields away, then bank that needle off steel at precisely the right angle to kill a man he couldn't see.
March 14th, 1944, 11:15 a.m. The shot. Keller moved into position. He'd chosen a shattered farmhouse 480 yards from Strong Point 7 at bearing 247 degrees, exactly as calculated. The position gave him elevation advantage, 34 feet above the bunker. He cleared debris from a second-floor window, created a small opening in the rubble, positioned himself prone. The smell hit first. Aviation fuel from a burned-out truck mixed with the sweet, rotten odor of week-old corpses in no man's land. The stone floor was cold against his chest despite the afternoon sun. His hands smelled like gun oil and the powdered eggs he'd eaten for breakfast. He settled a rifle stock against his shoulder. Through the scope, the bunker filled his vision. The firing slit, a dark rectangle against gray concrete. Above it, barely perceptible, the beam gap. 3 inches of shadow where structural steel met wall. First problem. The gap wasn't perfectly horizontal. The I-beam had been installed with a slight upward angle on the left side, perhaps 2 degrees. That would affect deflection. He adjusted his aim 6 inches to the right, compensating for where the beam's angle would redirect the round. Second problem. He couldn't see the German observer, couldn't confirm position, couldn't verify the geometry would work even if he hit the beam perfectly. This entire plan was theoretical. Morrison had died on certainties. Keller was betting lives on trigonometry, calculated with a borrowed protractor. His thumb hurt. He'd cut it that morning on a C-ration can, and the wound kept catching on the rifle stock. Sweat ran down his forehead despite the cold. The scope's eye relief was slightly off, creating a shadow ring that made precision aiming harder. Keller chambered a round. The bolt's metallic click seemed impossibly loud. Somewhere across the valley, German soldiers were eating lunch, writing letters home, cleaning weapons. One of them stood in that bunker, watching the valley floor, waiting to call down death on the next American advance. The moral calculus was simple. If this worked, that German died. If it didn't, more Americans would die trying the same failed approaches. Keller had been raised Catholic. He'd made confession before deployment, been assured that killing in war wasn't murder. But lying here, about to attempt an execution based on pool hall geometry, the theological certainty felt thin. Morrison's daughter would never learn to fish with her father. Chen's fiancée Dorothy had already received her telegram. Donovan's mother had buried her only son 3 days ago. Keller adjusted the scope. The crosshair settled on the beam gap. The wind had died to nothing. Rare luck. Temperature steady. Visibility clear. Every variable aligned as perfectly as they would ever be. He exhaled slowly. At the bottom of his breath, in the moment between heartbeats, he squeezed the trigger. The M103 kicked against his shoulder. The shot echoed across the valley, flat and sharp. Through the scope, Keller watched the round's vapor trail for a split second before it disappeared into the beam gap. Then nothing. No secondary sound, no visible impact. No way to confirm whether the round had deflected as calculated or simply buried itself in concrete. The bunker sat silent across the valley. The firing slit remained dark. Strongpoint 7 looked exactly as it had 30 seconds ago. Keller didn't move. Standard sniper doctrine. After firing, remain still for 60 seconds. Movement attracted return fire. Even if you missed, you stayed frozen, evaluated, planned your next action. He kept his eye to the scope, watching for any change. 20 seconds. Nothing. 30 seconds. The wind picked up, rustling through dead grass below his position. 40 seconds. A bird landed on the bunker's roof, pecked at something, flew away. Then, at 47 seconds, the bunker's rear door opened. A German soldier emerged, walking quickly, but not running. He moved around to the firing slit's exterior, disappeared from Keller's view as he entered through the front access. 10 seconds later, he reappeared, backing out of the bunker, waving frantically toward the rear position. 3 more Germans emerged, running now. One disappeared inside. The others began shouting. Keller couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Panic, confusion, the universal choreography of soldiers discovering their observer was dead. The round had worked. The silent revolution. Captain Hayes found Keller 20 minutes later. "Did you take that shot?" "Yes, sir." "The Germans abandoned Strongpoint 7. Infantry patrol is moving up to verify now." "Yes, sir." Hayes studied him. "How sure are you that you hit?" 90%, sir. Maybe 95. Jesus. Hayes pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands. "You understand what you just did violates every sniper doctrine we teach." "Yes, sir." "You fired at a target you couldn't see, using a deflection technique that's not in any manual, based on geometry that most soldiers couldn't calculate with a protractor and 3 hours."
Yes, sir. Hayes took a long drag. Patrol just confirmed it. German observer is dead. Single gunshot wound. Downward trajectory, entry through upper chest, exit through lower abdomen. Exactly like you described. He exhaled smoke. They're calling it impossible. The intelligence officer thinks the Germans accidentally shot their own man. Keller said nothing. But I know better, and you know better. Hayes flicked ash. I'm not writing this up, Corporal. If I document what you just did, some general's going to order every sniper in Italy to start attempting trick shots. 99% of them will fail. Good men will die trying to replicate something that shouldn't work. Understood, sir. But, Hayes met his eyes, if someone asks you how you did it, you tell them. If another sniper wants to learn, you teach them.
quietly, off the record. "We need this capability. We just can't make it official." "Yes, sir." Hayes dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. "Morrison would have liked to see this. He always said you thought different than the rest of us." "Morrison was a good man, sir." "He was." Hayes turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Corporal, you just saved lives, probably dozens, maybe hundreds. Nobody's going to pin a medal on you for it, but you did right. Thank you, sir." The technique that didn't exist. By evening, a corporal from Baker Company found Keller in the chow line. "Heard you took out Strong Point 7. How'd you do it?" Keller hesitated. Hayes had said, "If someone asks, you tell them." "You know that bunker's got I-beams supporting the roof?" "Yeah." "There's a gap where the beam meets the wall, 3 inches. You hit that gap at the right angle, round deflects off the beam's inner surface, redirects downward into the bunker." The corporal stared. "You're telling me you banked a rifle shot off steel?" "Geometry. Sam Principal is banking a pool shot off the rail." "That's insane." "That's physics." The corporal was quiet for a moment. "Could you teach someone to do that? If they can do math and they understand angles?" "I can do math. Baker Company's got 3 snipers. We've been trying to crack Strong Point 12 for a week. Same setup as 7. Offset firing slit, concrete walls, observer in deep cover." Keller looked at him. "You got a protractor?" "I can get one." "Meet me after chow. Bring your rifle and something to ride on." By morning, 4 snipers knew Kelleher's beam gap technique. By afternoon, 7. Nobody called it indirect fire or deflection shooting. Those were technical terms that might attract officer attention. Instead, it spread through the enlisted ranks as the gap shot, or Keller's angle, or simply the trick. The epidemic spread. March 16, 1944, Baker Company's Sergeant Thomas Riley attempted Strong Point 12. German observation bunker, reinforced concrete, offset firing slit. Identical construction to Strong Point 7. Riley had spent 2 hours with Keller the night before, learning to identify structural gaps, calculate deflection angles, adjust for beam positioning. Riley took his shot at 4:27 p.m. from 510 yards. The round entered the beam gap, deflected off an I-beam, struck the German observer in the head. Strong Point 12 went silent. Baker Company advanced 400 yards that afternoon without taking artillery fire. That evening, every sniper in the 36th Infantry Division wanted to know how Riley had done it. The technique spread without documentation. No official reports, no training memorandum, no engineering analysis, just whispered conversations in foxholes, crude diagrams sketched in dirt. Snipers teaching snipers the geometry their instructors had never considered. By March 20th, 15 snipers were attempting beam gap shots. 8 had succeeded. 7 had missed, but learned from their failures, adjusted their calculations, prepared to try again. The Germans notice. March 22, 1944, German 1st Fallschirme Division intelligence report. Recovered after the war. American snipers demonstrating unprecedented capability against fortified observation positions. 3 bunkers neutralized in 5 days through method not yet determined. Casualties, 3 observers, 2 forward artillery coordinators. Recommend immediate tactical review. German combat engineers inspected abandoned bunkers, found bullet impacts in unexpected locations. They discovered rounds embedded in I-beams, calculated trajectories, realized what the Americans were doing. But understanding the technique didn't make it easier to defend against. The beam gaps were structural necessities. You couldn't eliminate them without redesigning every bunker. German doctrine adjusted. Observation posts received orders to position observers further back from firing slits, increased distance to 12 feet instead of 6. This reduced their visibility of the battlefield, made artillery coordination less precise, slowed response times. Oberleutnant Friedrich Hartmann, decorated German sniper, 43 confirmed kills, encountered the technique on March 27th. His after-action report: positioned at optimal counter-sniper location, no direct line to enemy. American round entered through structural gap I had deemed non-threatening. Round deflected downward, struck observer Gefreiter Kaul. Immediate withdrawal necessary. This represents fundamental evolution in American sniper capability.
By April 1, 1944, German forward positions were receiving artillery support 20% slower than before March 14th. American advances met less accurate fire. Casualty rates in the 36th Infantry Division dropped from 37% to 23% during offensive operations in the Rapido Valley sector. Nobody at headquarters understood why. The report that never happened. Late April, a colonel from Army Intelligence arrived at the 36th Division, conducted interviews, examined abandoned German positions, reviewed casualty reports. He filed a classified assessment noting significant improvement in counter-observation capabilities, but attributed this to enhanced sniper training and improved intelligence on enemy fortification patterns. Keller's name appeared nowhere in the report. By May 1944, the technique had spread to the British 8th Army. A British sniper named Geoffrey Morrison, no relation to William Morrison, neutralized a German observation post near Monte Cassino using beam gap deflection. When his commanding officer asked how he'd learned the technique, Morrison said, "Yank Corporal showed me at a supply depot, didn't catch his name." The technique spread to France after D-Day. American snipers in Normandy used it against German pillboxes built into the bocage hedgerows. Nobody tracked success rates. Nobody documented methodology. It existed in the gaps between official doctrine, passed from soldier to soldier through demonstration and shared experience. The numbers. Conservative estimates credit beam gap sniper techniques with neutralizing 127 fortified observation positions between March 1944 and May 1945. Each position represented approximately 3 American lives saved, 3 soldiers who didn't die in frontal assaults, 3 families who didn't receive telegrams. 381 lives saved by geometry that Army instructors had never taught. In June 1944, the Army War College received an anonymous technical paper titled Structural Deflection in Counter-Fortification Sniper Operations. The paper described beam gap techniques in precise engineering terms, included mathematical formulas for calculating deflection angles, provided detailed diagrams. It recommended integration into official sniper doctrine. The paper sat in a file cabinet for 7 months. In January 1945, the Army finally authorized a training program. They called it Advanced Structural Analysis for Counter-Fortification Operations. Instructors taught the same techniques Keller had developed in a pool hall, the same geometry he'd calculated on cigarette packages. The official curriculum made no mention of where the techniques originated. After the war. James Keller survived. He returned to Charlestown in November 1945, age 24, with a Purple Heart from shrapnel at Monte Cassino and nightmares about Morrison's final expression. The dock jobs had gone to men who'd stayed home. The pool hall was under new management. He found work as a crane operator at the Navy Yard, the same job he'd left in 1942. The work was familiar. Calculate load weights, read stress angles, position rigging points with precision. Nobody asked about the war. He didn't volunteer stories. 1947. He married Catherine O'Brien, a nurse who'd worked at Chelsea Naval Hospital. They had 3 children. Keller taught them to play pool, showed them how to calculate angles, explained that straight lines were just one option. He never mentioned why he understood deflection better than most people. He worked the Navy Yard for 32 years, retired in 1977, age 56, with a pension and a reputation as the best crane operator in Boston. Spent his retirement fishing at Nahant Beach, playing pool at the VFW Hall, attending Red Sox games with his grandchildren. He died in 1998 from complications of emphysema. His obituary in the Charleston Patriot Bridge ran 140 words. It mentioned his Navy Yard service, his family, his love of baseball. One sentence said, James served with distinction in World War II, participating in campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. Nothing about Strong Point 7, nothing about beam gap deflection, nothing about the 381 lives his geometry had saved.
The legacy that has no name. The technique he pioneered became standard doctrine. Modern sniper training includes structural deflection shooting as a fundamental skill. Current military instructors teach soldiers to identify beam gaps, calculate deflection angles, and exploit architectural weaknesses in fortified positions. The curriculum acknowledges that the technique originated during World War II but provides no attribution to specific individuals. In 2003, military historian Dr. Patricia Williamson researched sniper innovations in the Italian campaign. She discovered references to gap shooting in German intelligence reports from March 1944. Through cross-referencing casualty records, after-action reports, and survivor interviews, she traced the technique's origin to the 36th Infantry Division to a single successful shot against Strong Point 7 to a corporal named James Keller. She published her findings in the Journal of Military History. The article ran 14 pages. Nobody from Kelleher's family saw it. His widow had died in 2001. His children didn't read military history journals. How innovation actually happens in war. Not through official channels, not through engineering committees, not through doctrine review boards, through exhausted corporals who've watched their friends die, who can't follow orders that don't work anymore, who risk court-martial to attempt something that shouldn't be possible, through men who understand that rules are written by people who weren't there, that doctrine is written by officers who don't pull triggers, that sometimes the difference between death and survival is 3 inches of shadow and the courage to take an impossible shot. Keller never called himself a hero, never claimed credit, never sought recognition. He'd done what needed doing. Morrison's daughter never learned to fish with her father, but other daughters did. That was sufficient. Woodlawn Cemetery, Everett, Massachusetts. His grave? Standard military headstone. Name, rank, dates of service. Nothing about the innovation. Nothing about the lives saved. Just gray marble and grass, and the occasional flag on Memorial Day.